It's episode 41 of the Fintech Moshpit, and we have the owner of Olde Mecklenburg Brewery, John Marrino, to answer the question, is it time for Charlotte to reopen for business? Episode 41, the Fintech Moshpit. I am joined by John Marrino, a great local Charlottean, a great business owner, founder of Olde Mecklenburg Brewery. John, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, sir. Appreciate it.
So let me tee this up because I was just inspired. Part of the beauty of the Fintech Moshpit, which is our show where we do daily different tidbits of information that are important, is we're able to pivot quickly. Sometimes it's about fintech news. Sometimes it's about technology or banking in general. Sometimes it's just what our community needs to hear. It's about small business. It's about public policy. It really touches some form or factor of business. And I've been struggling with the small business front with COVID-19 for a while. You look at some of these stats, 44% of total employment is small business employees, right? 430,000 jobs are going to be lost in NC this year. That represents like 12% unemployment. We learned this morning from Mark Vittner, chief economist of Wells Fargo in our group. 93% of the businesses in Charlotte have less than 50 employees. And then we've heard factors that point towards 20% of small businesses may never reopen their doors after all this is said and done. So that frames the backdrop of a really critical topic. And, you know, we've been working on the city side, really trying to stay in our lane, working on small business recovery. I've tried to personally stay out of calls for action to other bodies and just really focus on our lane. And I'm to the point kind of where I can't do that anymore. And it feels like we're trying to repurpose some kind of boat that we're all in to work in the new normal, and it's still sinking. So it's an important question. Is it time to reopen? If so, how do you do that? And I saw a post from you the other day, and I'm just going to read an excerpt of it. But essentially, what your post shocked me into a moment of like, if John's saying this, right, and it's not happening yet, should we be doing more? So here's my last point, teeing this up, and then I want you to tell us all what you were thinking. You said, in part, why can't I, as a responsible and ostensibly free American, open my 1.5 acre beer garden and spread people out to ensure social distancing so we can stay in business and pay our now suffering staff? Currently, I cannot by government decree. However, it's no problem for Home Depot to stay open so all the bankers and lawyers and government workers can do all of their home improvement projects while they're being paid full salary to work at home. This situation is unsustainable for much longer. Yeah, I can understand some vulnerable or sick people are going to die. This will be unavoidable in the normal course of the world and has been and will continue to be the case forever. At this point, we already have enough data to know what subsets of the population are at high risk from coronavirus. They should self-quarantine and be supported by all of us, which is by definition the government. The rest of us need to get back to life and to work. Clearly, you're frustrated like many small business owners that are struggling right now are, but there's just an element of truth in that that I wanted to talk to you about. So tell me what you were thinking and what a deeper view into that sense.
Well, I mean, I'm a engineer by education, and so I'm a logical guy. And I look at the data. I actually go onto the CDC website and I read the data and I look at the stats, and I go and I think that the hysteria around this has maybe gotten us a little too far removed from perhaps the best way to handle it. And, you know, young people aren't getting sick. People in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are not getting sick by and large. And, you know, there are people that are ill, people that have pre-existing conditions, and older people are the ones that are suffering. And we have to protect them. But at the same time, we've got everybody locked up. And well, not quite everybody, but we've got entire industries that are shut down. And so it's almost like a tale of two worlds. We have people that are winning big in this crisis, and we have people that are losing big. And the people that are losing big didn't do anything different than the people that are winning big. The crisis has nothing to do with the actions of the individual industries. It has to do with those that are selected to be essential and stay open, and those that are not. And I would argue that one of the most dangerous places in town right now is the grocery store, or Home Depot, or Lowe's, or Walmart, or Costco, because there's no possibility of social distancing in those places. So I don't know how that's any different than my beer garden, where I can spread tables, keep the tables 10 or 15 feet apart, and people can enjoy a beer and sit outside under a tree and doing no harm to anyone. And so I'm a little bit frustrated, because it's very dangerous. The longer this goes on, the less people are going to make it out the other end. And it's people's livelihoods, and that is a public health issue.
Yeah, I think that your sentiments are they've been in the back of my head, and it's been getting louder and louder week over week as we've been in here, which is just that thought process of, I get it, and I'm not going to be at all in a spot to throw my colleagues on the county or the health director or any other places under the bus. They are working under intense circumstances, but there's got to be some call to action right now, which is like, look, we've been in this for a month and more now, right? And it feels like there's a level of consistency in what our ordinances and our governance dictates that we could have been a little bit of a sharper tool by now, which is just kind of like, I feel like at the end of the day, it's not saying, hey, what's essential and what's not. We cannot live like that forever. It's what are the practices that need to be in place. And going back to your measurable point, I think measurement is the key factor here. The models show that it's 45% social distancing that's required for us to stay at these levels here. So I guess, being blunt, what the hell does that mean? What is it that we can be doing? What can we unleash you to make your small business survive and make that input in the model work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert, and we're doing our part. And so I'm not saying that I'm the guy that should say when we should do what or how, but I think that if somebody gives us guidelines on what are good practices, the medical community, on the social distancing, I think as a responsible business person, we can manage that. I can control the number of people that come into my establishment. I can control the number of people that enter my beer garden. I can control how many people get in line at my beer hut to order a beer, and how far apart they stand, just like they're doing at the grocery store, and just like they're doing at Walgreens. So I think, to just say all restaurants have to stay closed, or all breweries have to stay closed, you're potentially wiping out a huge segment of small industry. Obviously the PPP loan program is helping. And I'm very appreciative that the government pulled that off as quick as they did. I'm actually shocked, but pleasantly shocked. And that's going to help bridge the gap for us. But at some point, coronavirus is not going away. It's not going away this year. So at some point we have to say, okay, when is the time to get back to at least some semblance of normalcy?
Let me ask you this follow-up, because you have been the trailblazer in Charlotte as it relates to the brewery boom that we've seen. You and I have discussed this in the past. I asked if you had some kind of crystal ball and you knew it, and you were like, just kind of fell into place at the right time. Yeah. You're arguably the most secure and rooted of all the 38 plus breweries and cideries and things we have in town. What's your business going to look like if you have to stay doing what you're doing right now through the end of June or even into July?
Well, we're fortunate that we are the largest brewery, and we have a fairly good position financially. So we've actually forecast to hopefully open up by the end of June. But it's blowing a huge hole in our finances. So We just have to recover from that. But that's going to set us back a couple of years. The problem is if we don't open it back up, you can't survive losing 75% of your revenue and continue to operate a business. You just can't. And thank goodness we have the grocery business. Without that, we would be in much worse shape. And a lot of the smaller breweries don't have that. So they're closed. What it will look like, it's hard to say. I mean, when the PPP runs out, and if we're not able to open, then it's going to be a big problem. We are going on the basis that we are going to be able to reopen, and hopefully way before the end of June. The question is what's that going to look like? And opening up at 25% or 50% is sustainable for a while, but at some point we have to get back to normal, or else the business is going to have to fundamentally change.
So I've been knee deep in the recovery elements of trying to help for this, but like I said, I think it's time for me to make a cautious, soft yet impactful call to action for some of my colleagues. And I'd like to tell you the broad strokes of it, and you tell me from somebody that would have to operate in that, under that, if it could work for you. Okay. So, and I'd start with a couple asterisks next to it, right? One, this isn't simple. So I'm not sitting there saying, hey, let's jumpstart the economy at any cost to health. Doesn't matter. Now's the time. I'm not saying that. Right. I'm also not saying, hey, folks, now's the time to go out and gather and protest together, because I mean, that's just like, it's only further dividing in ways that we could be uniting the leaders to get behind the small businesses right now. So with all those kind of asterisks, and one final one being, I am not throwing our county commissioners or anyone else under the bus. They are operating under extreme circumstances, but I just want this case to be heard. That is, it is time to reopen business, and it's time to do so in a thoughtful but fast and nimble fashion that gets more towards those data points and the endpoints for what we're trying to do to make a consistent and an enforceable and a really meaningful relaunch of the small businesses that are simply dying and will never reopen their doors more and more by the day. So I don't know what all the answers are on this, but I do know a couple factors that I think would be important. And you alluded to one a second ago. Number one, first and foremost, what are the requirements or the guardrails for reopening? Deliver them crisply, but at a high objective level, not at a micromanaged, here are the 85,000 things you need to do, right? So it may be, and I'll make it up as an example, but the experts, the scientists, the health professionals, the civic leaders need to kind of come up with this quickly. But it might be, if you're in a brewery or in some kind of restaurant industry, you need to have controls in place that when people arrive at your facility, social distance is enforced. When they get there, they get to a spot where it can obviously be controlled from social distancing. Maybe it's wearing masks, and maybe there's a question to you, which is like, how is it that people, if they're mandated to wear masks, that they can come and enjoy one of your beverages? I'm just throwing out, those are challenges that I would rather you be creative and figure out how to solve than me say, oh, it's impossible from a government perspective to do. And then once they pay, how are they not handing you cash? How are you seamlessly doing that? And then when they're leaving, how do they safely leave? I'm not saying this needs to be 1,000 things. I'm saying it needs to be a couple basic guardrails for our major 3, 4, or 5 industry verticals in Charlotte that small, medium-sized business operates, that then enables you to be able to innovate, you to be able to get back to work quickly, and us to measure that as it relates to your compliance and ability to do it. Because I would argue that most of the things we're seeing today right now, where people aren't wearing masks and they're in the parks and they're doing all these things, we're either looking for individuals to be accountable or the government to mandate them. Why not throw that responsibility to the small businesses that are dying to get back in service? I bet you guys will self-police that and self-enforce it. I mean, what do you think about that approach? How would that work for you?
Well, in general, I think it's good. I think that ultimately, though, the individual has to be responsible. I mean, if you make the businesses responsible, then you're going to open up a can of worms with regard to liability. So that worries me a little bit, because if an individual who's supposed to be an adult if they're in my facility drinking beer, right? They're over 21. If they violate something that we've imposed, and I get held liable for it, that could be a big problem. But in general, I agree. I mean, I think it has to be a cooperative effort by the business owner, the individuals, and the government. And I'm totally fine with that. And I look, I'm not saying we need to open today. I'm saying, the data. When I look, like I said, I look at the data, and I think over the next couple of weeks we're going to see where the data goes. But one thing that jumped out at me yesterday on a post from John Hardister was that there's 373 total people in the hospital with coronavirus in the whole state of North Carolina right now. Only 373, and that number dropped by 92 yesterday from the day before. And so the data, if the data is like that and moving in the right direction, then I think we need to start getting ready to reopen at least, and then have, as you said, some guidelines put in place for what it looks like, so that we can get it done sooner rather than later. Not wait till the day it's time to reopen and then start trying to come up with guidelines.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. It's a fair point as it relates to not putting too much of the accountability and liability on the businesses. I think my only point there, though, is that if you know that you can reopen as long as you're able to follow some practical social distancing guidelines and be responsible, like you said in your post, I just think inherently you are going to be laying out the rules of your 1.5 acres and what it takes to be in there and stay in there more effectively than we could do in greenways and parks over the last 4 weekends, right?
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that.
So that's one point there. I think as I'm kind of just thinking through how you're ultimately going to come back, I think the urgency for me, and you kind of might be in a spot where you're like, look, I understand there's going to be a little working here to get it figured out. Maybe it isn't for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month from now. I think my challenge with that is we are losing smaller businesses than you, but it's impacting you already, and it's going to start hurting more the more weeks that go on, the larger you are. We're losing them by the day. Right. And we could be in a point for practicing the social distancing and getting it going very, very quickly with some good, focused, smart people figuring out the thing. But you said it earlier, this isn't going away. Like, there's no inoculation on the horizon right now that's going to save this. Our new normal, when we come out of quarantine, is not going to be like it was in January and February. So I think the urgency for me, and I'd be interested, is do you feel the same kind of sense of like Old Mecklenburg Brewery for the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months isn't going to be the same experience it was 2 months ago?
Yeah, I've kind of resigned myself to that, and I'm hoping we can get back to something that it resembles normalcy, even though it won't be. I mean, the atmosphere, as long as the atmosphere is nice and people enjoy it and they can stay safe, then that's the key. But obviously things are going to be a little bit different for a period of time, and because this thing isn't going away, and people are going to continue to get coronavirus for the foreseeable future. The swine flu is still out there from 2009. You can see it in the data if you go on the CDC website. Everybody's getting swine flu every year, and that thing's been around for 11 years now. So it's not going away, and so we have to figure out how to live with it, because we can't stay in our houses forever.
What would you say to the people that I know are watching this, because I talk to them every day as well, and I'm certainly not trying to bucket myself into a grouping of like, hey, here's a hot issue that I could take a controversial side on. Like, I was very thoughtful about even discussing this today because I didn't want to add fuel to a fire of something that we were in a divisive political society anyway before this. There is still so much divisiveness in this important topic, way more than there should be. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying go physically protest, or, this is something where like at all costs, let's just like rip this sucker up and get it going. But like, what would you say to all the people that are kind of shaking their head right now? Like, that is so irresponsible of you to think that because you want to sling beer in your 1.5 acres and you're not allowed to right now, that you need to do that. Like, because I mean, there's a group of people that literally, no matter how we phrased it and said, that's what they're thinking right now. And it's a problem because it's making two perspectives on this felt, and the pressure felt by our elected leaders.
Yeah, well, I mean, I respect their opinion, and I hope they respect mine. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's different people have different viewpoints. You know, and we are slinging beer. We're making beer every day because we have to make it for the grocery stores. We have 52 people still working here, but 100 people are not here right now, and they're not working. And so, you know, I'm not saying that it's my way or the highway. I'm just saying that, you know, we have to find a solution at some point, and so we have to discuss it. And so I totally respect those people's opinions. But I hope they also understand the viewpoint on the other side. It's not about me slinging beer to make money. It's about me keeping the business alive, which will provide jobs for my employees and provide for their families going forward. And if all the businesses fail, there's nothing left for the people. So it doesn't work. It has to be solved at some point.
Yeah, I think that's well said. So I think I'd just kind of ask you for some final thoughts and words from an owner of one of our favorite smaller, I don't even know if we can call you a small business at this point.
We're very small, yes.
Medium, small to medium size, but somebody who grew up in the small business ranks of Charlotte over the last decade or more, and you're struggling and you're seeing a challenge and some inconsistencies. What's your final message to folks?
Well, look, we're a part of the community, and we will do what we have to do, and we'll muddle through regardless. But we do need to have the discussion, and we do need to come up with a plan as a community of how to get back to life, and that's all. I mean, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. This is going to be 1,000 shades of gray in terms of nobody's right, nobody's wrong here. It's going to be a judgment thing, and it's going to require people to make difficult decisions, especially at the government level. Because there are no absolutes. So that's all. I don't really have anything else to add. I think that, like I said, we'll do what the government asks us to do. But we also want to make sure that as many people make it out of the other end of this as possible.
No. We appreciate you joining. I'll say finally, here's my call to action to all my colleagues and everyone out there. I appreciate you so much, and I know what you're going through personally in your lives and professionally in trying to kind of manage through this. It's brutal. It's painful. Every day we wake up on fire. But please, for the sake of this community, there's no need to buy into the different angles and sides of this debate right now who might be arguing for the wrong reasons. There's a practical matter in this call to action, which is now's the time for us to put the guardrails in place at a high level that enable businesses like John's and thousands of others to be able to say, that's what you mean by social distancing that will get us to 45% into the models? Fantastic. Here's what I need to do to execute that and allow me to be accountable to get it done. And my call to action is take as much time as you need to do it, but you have all the resources and all these experts. Please do it now. Right. Get them together now, because you could have them back open by this weekend if you're able to put the right data elements and guidance in place where they can make sure if people are going to be on their property or use their products or services, they achieve 45%, whatever that data input means, of social distancing across this entire community with their individual actions while surviving. So John Marrino, Old Mecklenburg Brewery founder, we appreciate you so much joining us, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. That was episode 41 of the Fintech Moshpit. We, my friends, are going to see you next time.